All right. So, see where we got to last time. Everything's good before we start. Okay. Okay. So, let's see. I think everything looks good. Let's see where we got up to. Bit later today, so I might be a bit more tired. Um, so we had this error with the test. Let's have a look there first. Um, it's mostly going to be remembering where we were and what we did last time. So we had an error with it. Well, this is that's obviously wrong, and that's probably what he fixed our error. Okay, current directory. So do these tests pass if I run them like this in the IDE? Okay. No such column attempt. Because we have a problem with our migration. Probably if there is a problem there, they should have been caught by my query, and the fact it wasn't is potentially a problem with the querier because that clearly says attempts. So well, probably doesn't make sense to be called attempts, does it now? Because it's the attempt. Oops. Attempt. Okay. I was thinking before, one of the things I'm definitely missing here is I need to record what kind of job it is. So we know what it is for observability and what action we're actually performing. And we need to know what queue it's on. That's something else we missed yesterday. Because we're going to try to have a modular queue system, I think, with our job system. And one of the other things I was thinking of is we probably need more statuses. This probably isn't exhaustive enough. Because we're going to, especially when it comes to having good observability, because I want to have a really nice dashboard for this too. So when it comes to having good observability, we're going to need to be more explicit with the state. So then it's more analyzable, I think. So a job can also be scheduled to run. So it can be pending, scheduled, running, completed, failed. It could also have different types of failed statuses, I guess. Timeout. The more statuses we have, the more observable we can make the interface, right? A job can also be cancelled. Um, and let's say we can also discard a job. And let's say we've hit our max attempts. Maybe we want to be able to retry it still. Possibly. Maybe we just want to be able to know that something's retriable. I'm trying to feel like, trying to think if we can somehow make things obvious in the interface we'll obviously build later, rather than so explicit rather than implicit with the status. Because the more explicit the status is, the less questions there are about how it's actually being interpreted in the code. And we can also be explicit with in moving between statuses, which would become a direct representation of it calculating the current status. Right, so the change of this would be a direct representation rather than an inference based on the logic. Am I happy with this? I'm thinking I might redo this data structure in the future because it is very modification heavy. But what we might want to do is record health information about the job itself. Having a look at the data types for SQLite again. I'm tempted to completely change this database structure to be more similar to another project I have. And I'm wondering if I should make that decision now or just get it working first and then make that decision, whether or not I do or not. Is if I want to have this be, I don't want to say event sourcing because it's like event sourcing light. But this table is obviously very modification heavy. And the reason why is I was thinking of recording the errors, like if a job fails to record the error of the job with the job. But then how do you know which attempt you're recording the error for? Unless you try and record all of them. Or You just try to record the last error that has happened, which is reasonable. But I don't like information loss, because information loss means observability, like literally denying your capabilities with observability. And for a system which is meant to be deeply observable, that's contradictionary. We have new things here, though, so we can update our... I'm still just contemplating just doing the split. So in job state, we have scheduled at, updated at, created at. So we added more stuff. So at the very least, we should try and replicate what we've done. Did I just add that? How did you get where the other thing came from? So ID kind Q. That's what. Oh, and it just had okay. It added Q'd out for some reason. Q. And then I changed it to attempt. And then we can have last error. See, this just doesn't make me happy. It's information lost. Yeah. Now we have our new states to record. See, the thing is, I'm trying to wrestle with losing this history. So, probably something I should have thought about before I started to stream. Trying to wrestle with what to do instead. Okay. what I'm thinking of is splitting this up into two tables, and I'm trying to figure out if um I'm trying to figure out the best way to get away with doing that. Because what I can do is I can have a table for the structure of the job, and then a table for each instance of the job's execution. And I think that's going to be a better way of handling this data. I think. I think it'll be more efficient. Either way, when we in queue, we're going to, because now we added kind and queue, we're going to want to pass in those information, and we can comment things a bit more. Um, why does it not like the word ran being to be run? But this also needs to have all of the new things too. Sorry. All right for the other. Temps. Change this. Bet. This is more of a database concept rather than an internal concept to what we're doing. What we're doing, the logic would be like, when was it enqueued? So that would be more logically, created out and updated out. That's very much a database. Is the record creation. So we also have to add our new things. So kind. Oh. Yeah. And probably because we're going to be serializing these things, I'm going to need to retouch. I don't know if I'm going to be serializing though in this thing, but we might as well add it so we have it. Probably will be. Not quite like that. There's going to be job state. Yeah. And so they're pre-touched. So if you plug in Sonic, this will pre-touch with Sonic. But if you don't pass in Sonic, then it doesn't pre-touch. So that's the purpose of this. So it's just so because as part of Pico, you can swap in and out the JSON backend, and so this will allow for integration with Sonic. Okay. So what I've just been going over what I've been doing, but I need to just remind myself what our fundamental goal of the day should be. So it was to get this working, wasn't it? Do not have these entries. Yeah, I'm gonna have to regenerate the SQL. Bit confused why that's not given. Because I need to fetch them in the queries. I'm still just thinking of just trashing this. I'm still just thinking of trashing this. Is whatever. Because how bad would it be if I just trashed it? What would it even look like if I trashed it? Like, what could it look like if I trashed it? What could it look like? Let's just have a think for a second what it could look like. Create table. If not exists jobs. Did the same mistake last time. Well, this would be the same. You'd still have an ID. Because what I could do is I could just have a mutable and unmutable version. So then you could have like an audit trail. I need to have a deep think about this. Because what I do in another project is I have it like this. And then the benefit is I have the stable reference here for the job as a whole. And then job versions would have a version ID and a reference up to the other ID. And then we have no data loss at all. The only reason why I'm hesitating to is because the data in this project would for workers would be flipping its state more often. The status, it would be flipping it, if it contradicts the whole persisting everything. Um, persisting the state explicitly rather than implicitly. So I'm currently fighting with that. Because the downside is I don't want to make it too inefficient query. I'm trying to figure out a nice way to do it with indexes, I think. Because one option I could do is I could still do it like this, and then the latest version is represented here. So that makes it the fastest, and it could do that with triggers. Which can obviously be atomic. Which also, once again, means that I still have all of the history. I'm going to do a little bit of Googling. Because it would mean that the root table is, like a snapshot. What has no gas? What do you mean by no gas? I don't understand. Not much. What's good with you? You having a nice day? That's good to hear. It's 2 a.m. for me, so I'm tiny bit tired. Yeah. Yeah, I've kind of paused because I was trying to rethink my database structure through and trying to think of the best way to proceed. Yeah, I'm building new worker system for my framework. Um and the problem I was getting concerned about is what I don't like in databases is losing data. Like, when you update a table, you inherently lose data. And in other systems, I usually get around this by using a bit of an event sourcing model. But the problem here, and it's more of a conundrum that I'm trying to think through rather than a problem I'm having as such, is I'm wondering if by doing that, I'm necessarily going to make things slower. Because obviously for a worker system, performance is important. So, and, a high amount of similar queries will be taking place. So I'm trying to think of a model which is highly indexable so it can be as efficient as possible in the later plan that the database engine makes, as well as not losing data. So what I'm currently fighting against is the idea that it may be that the answer is duplicating data. That's fine. I don't mind explaining more if you're interested. It's not like a search algorithm. It's a worker system. So basically, the idea is because I have a framework for Golang. Um, basically, the idea of my framework is it allows you to write. If I find an example here, it allows you to write um files like Vue. No, it's just I just want it to be as highly performant as possible. So it's not like it has to search the database at all. Um, I'm just talking about database indexes here. So in order to just do simple wheres as performant as possible. Um, and so because obviously a worker system will be constantly updating the state and redistributing work, and you'll be performing these queries a huge amount. So I'm just trying to figure out the best way to have a combination of not losing data, not putting load on the database. And like I said, right now, I'm leaning on duplicating data to get around it, but I don't like that idea. Because what I was thinking about duplicating data is that I can have a very indexable table, which has the current data, but then I record the versions, the history of it in another table, which is kind of a butchered way of doing event sourcing. Do other music. But yeah, so what I have is this a framework for Go, where the idea is you can write files like view files, single file components, and you can have the template block, which is very similar to Vue. So instead of v4, it's p4, or instead of if, it's pif. But instead of the JavaScript block, you have a Golang block, and then it's server side rendered. Yeah, so there'll be obviously, you know, in a system which has lots of jobs, so a job is like a background task, right? So whenever the application wants to perform a task in the background, but also wants to know that that task has been performed reliably without fault. If it needs to be retried, it's retried. If it needs to be redistributed on another worker, that can be done. Yeah, so the thing about databases ultimately, and this is always the complication, is the way that they work. If where's the data loss? Well, the thing is that if you have a database is made up of tables. If you update a field in a table, you inherently lose the previous version of whatever the field was, right? So you've lost the history. So what you need to do is a model like you get event sourcing. There's other models. Event sourcing, and the idea of event sourcing is it keeps a history of every single event that has happened. Now the problem with event sourcing is the way that event sourcing works, if you do it properly, is it records every tiny change that happens over time. And then you're meant to replay those events back to find out the current state. Or you have to snapshot it, which isn't really what I entirely want to do. But basically, it's kind of like recording the history of what's going on. So that's basically the conundrum I'm having, where the database structure like you see here, you know, someone is using the order service in this picture. I don't know if you see it there. And then the event store is the history of events that's taken place. So the first event will be that the order is created. Then the second one, that was the order was updated, you know, the order was placed, blah, 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 blah. Rather than just having one record, which you just keep updating with the current state. And the benefit of this is there's quite a lot of benefits to event sourcing. One of them is you never lose data, which is always great for a business who, when you have to audit or analyze why something happened. And another reason why event sourcing is really liked is it can also mean that you can, if something breaks and then you fix your application, you can replay the same series of events in your code to prove that your new version fixes it, if that makes sense. Kind of. It's a fundamental way of changing your database. I wouldn't say it's like caching them, but it's just a fundamental way of being able to keep track of the order that things happened. Um, but yeah, by default with databases, and this is especially the case with um, in the past, old applications, they tend to be too aggressive with just throwing away data. Correct. Exactly. So it's also storing the commands used in sequence, their output, and what happened. So you can replay it. That's a core part of event sourcing, is being able to replay the the situation in a particular point of time. It also means that um like I worked with a finance company at one point and they were using event sourcing, and it meant that they could look at a specific date and be able to snapshot exactly what everything was like at that very specific point of time and replay any event that was going on. So it makes everything just fully transparent and observable. The thing about event sourcing is that doing it in the really traditional ways, I tend to find it to be sometimes too complicated and unnecessary because you don't always need all of the benefits of event sourcing. Um, and most of the time, people really go into event sourcing. It's kind of enterprise, and it uses, in my opinion, more resources than is always needed. Right. So I'm trying to balance the line of having something as performant as possible to query, um, while keeping the whole history. So it's like kind of like an event sourcing light, I think, is what I'm trying to do. I think. Um, but yeah, the most difficult part of databases is just getting your schema right from the beginning because it's not fun to change after the fact. So that's why it's a lot of thinking in depth of what to actually do. Because once I've locked in, I'd rather not change it too much. Yeah, exactly. Because what inevitably happens is your fundamental data structures tend to change quite drastically, um, depending on what you've done for your database. Um, and I started this yesterday by making this mutable table, but inevitably I feel like I'm losing data, and and what I want to be able to do is to create an interface afterwards where someone can look at the interface and see all of the history of a specific job, and be able to debug it from the interface. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you know every single thing that happened and changed. Or otherwise, you're just going to be inferring information because you don't have all the information. And then that could lead you down rabbit holes and, you know, turn a 15-minute job into a 3-day job. So, yeah, so what was I had on my other monitor? I was just having a quick look at another repository I did. I was setting up the database there. What's your background? Some intense stabbling. Oh, that's good. What's your opinion on Vulkan? I ask because I remember trying to learn OpenGL like 15 years ago or something, and my mind just broke. So I never got really that deep into computer graphics. Um, but I've as a user, I've always been impressed by Vulkan because it's impressive how the rise of Linux gaming has been so fast with Vulkan and Steam and all of this, right? I wish I knew the actual technologies underneath it because it would be interesting to know why. Yeah, I'm genuinely surprised. Like I'm honestly surprised how many games just seem to work natively now with a Linux. It's I didn't think it would happen this quickly. Because obviously I'm using Fedora here um as my daily driver. Oh, that's cool. I need to check out Mint because I know some of my clients are interested in ditching Windows, and they're real corporate companies, which really surprises me. And so I'm gonna have to check out Mint at some point because I have to see if I can move over corporate companies from Windows to Mint. Um, so I'm interested how that's going to turn out. The main driver has been money, which is we can slap Mint on like ancient machines and they'll run efficiently and fast. Whereas with Windows, people are constantly forced to buy new machines every like um, 4 years or so, 3 to 4 years, which adds up. Yeah, it's like since this year. It's I didn't even think like it blows my mind. It's since this year. I mean, it's partly because of relations with America going down the toilet, over in Europe, but a large part of it is just how expensive tech has become because the prices of RAM and all of that stuff has gone up so much that the normal computers that they would requisition for their staff has gone up sometimes two, three, four times. And if they have to keep replacing the machines every few years, but you can just swap to Mint and use the old machines as good as new, then the actual savings on the company is has an actual dollar value, especially when they have quite a lot of staff. Like if you got like 100 staff, um, and the price of machines has gone up by like 3 times. That is actually a substantially more investment, just to be able to run the latest versions of Windows. Um, Whereas put Mint on it and get rid of Office and use like LibreOffice or something like that, you can run everything on a fraction of the resources. So it's always money that drives decisions at the end of the day. It's always money. Um, yeah, and obviously in Europe, and this is less to do with money and more to do with relations going down the toilet. But you have a lot of governments moving over to Linux now too. So the French government is moving over entirely to Linux, and the German government is moving entirely over to Linux, and I think Estonia too. So when a government moves over to Linux, you're talking about, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of machines, right? So yeah. Relations with Europe and America are an all-time low. Well, what I'm talking about when I say government, I'm talking about like the bureaucracy in the government, right? So that's going to be, all of the municipalities and all of the local government and, all of the civil servants. And obviously, they're all going to be using normal, um, up to date software. I have no idea what they do in the military, right? Um, that's a whole different ball game because obviously military is based on a lot bigger contracts that go on for multi years, right? So I don't know if the military would be making any changes anytime soon, especially because if we have technology that we buy from America, we might have to use that technology on operating systems that they've dictated, right? So if you're managing a fighter jet or something like that. I mean, I have no idea. I have no military experience, but yeah, it surprises me because I've always been a big supporter of Linux. It's been my daily driver for I don't know how many years, 15 years maybe. And the whole time, I just always assumed that it was never going to happen, but it's happening somehow. So I think I'm going to go with the duplication method. Yeah, when's that? Like 20. It's not actually that far away. 2032, isn't that the next epoch? Wait, no. Isn't it 2032? That the year? Oh, no, it's 2038. The 2038 problem. So I mean, they got ages left. Got 12 years until this is an issue. The apocalypse. And I hadn't heard of that. Oops, I didn't mean to jump down. Oh, yeah, I'm not sharing my screen, but yeah, it says apocalypse. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I think I'm going to duplicate data because that is part of the event sourcing model. I'm not entirely doing event sourcing here, but by duplicating data, I kind of simplify my problem. And then I can always try and find a better way of solving this in the future. So, the job version, let's say we have a version sequence as the ID. And then we'll have the job ID, which is going to be a foreign key. Then we're going to need an index. Let's give the queue a default entry. Everything else. And do the same thing here. That's really interesting. I'm gonna have to check it out at some point because is Vulkan um is it completely different to OpenGL in how you write it or how you interface with it? I'm really wondering if it's one of those things that if I had time, I'd love to dive into to figure out how it works myself. Because, like I said, I've been so impressed about how gaming on Linux has just become so competitive, and so many games just run on Linux now, without having to do too much work myself. And I realized that a lot of it is Valve doing a lot of work. I don't really entirely know everything they're doing, but it really feels that since I don't know which year in particular, but in the past few years, the adoption and support for Linux has gone up tremendously. Like even just installing the video drivers on Linux now is one command. Whereas before, installing the video drivers on Linux would usually be like a 2-day event where you're messing around and fighting it and crashing your system, rebuilding your system, and now it's all just fluid and maintained. And I realize a large part of that is AI. Yeah, it's the friction I get on a daily basis of Linux has gone down substantially since. Like I said, I'm not sure which year it is, but I feel like it's probably around 2020, 2021, around that period. It's crazy how uncombative Linux has become. And it's not really Linux that has made the change. What's happened is because Linux has been obviously so stable for so long, that's finally companies are starting to actually support it natively more and more and more. Um Hello Elemental. How are you doing? You are a master programmer. Well, that makes me happy. I am not a master programmer. You're working on reaching Grandmaster. How many levels are there? Is it one of those things where you're on level 3 of 99? It sounds like you're a character in one of those shitty mobile game adverts. I see. So the goal is the evil anime laugh. So where am I? So I'm curious if I ever tested my framework on creating triggers. I think I did. At least for banning updates. Pretty sure I've tested this. Oops. Oh yeah. There is an immense amount of conversations these days. It's almost endless about how hated C++ is these days. There's no reason to ever use C++. Yeah, that seems to be the current discourse on the internet. See, the thing about, not having things available is like a return to simplicity that a lot of people enjoy. So I would say right now C++ is the punching bag of the internet. Um, I think it's ultimately just because it's not cool anymore. Still not sure entirely if I'm doing this nicely. Still not entirely sure I'm happy with this way of doing. It's not really a freelance gig. Well, kind of it is actually. Um, so I have my own company called PolitePixels, and um, I have clients who obviously I have, on a contract, and then clients which just appear out of nowhere. Um, is more of a company than a freelance thing. Because some of our clients are kind of like on a contract basis. But yeah, similar enough. Um, but and Pico is one of the products that I've built over the past 5 years, because what it is basically every time I build something for a client at some point, I usually, you know, people will often need similar things done, but to different things. So what I mean by that is people want to have, say, an email service, but may want the emails being sent to a different backend, like Amazon, AWS, or whatever. Yeah, I wouldn't go as far as saying it's a CEO. Is the main difference is that obviously with a freelance, it's a different structure of company, right? So freelance is usually what they um it's usually, when you do your taxes, you're not limited liability, right? So you're you're like a sole trader, if that makes sense. Whereas PolitePixels is technically a limited liability company. Um, so the main difference is that if I work for a client, they don't have the tax man coming after them for thinking that I'm actually meant to be part of their company. Yeah, I don't know when I started. I think it was around 2021, maybe 2022. I think something along those lines. Um, but it's all sorts of companies coming in with different requests and trying to standardize as much as possible what I do for them. Yeah, it was more just after COVID. It was when things were settling back down. But it was before the economy started crunching and getting worse. So it was the sweet spot for starting. But unfortunately, it didn't stay the sweet spot. So much money in the market. Everyone was rich for about a year. Everyone was shoving all their money in NFTs, apparently. Buying pixels on a screen. Yeah. Simpler times. Yeah, it was crazy. It feels like a fever dream now. These NFT values. So I think kind and Q can't change. Because it only makes sense to store the version of things that can change. Payload can also not change. Payload would also be the same. And priority change? Max attempts can't change. So instead of this, let's be explicit, recorded at. Let's get rid of claimed at. Get rid of maybe. No, I don't know about that. Timeout can't change. I think I'm still not happy with this database structure. But I think this is an improvement. I just think it's not there. Not ideal yet. It's occurring to me that we never actually record the result of anything. This. What's my thought on using an LLM to solve this? So I think it depends what you're trying to do. And what I mean by that is, sometimes there's a love for the game. Do you know what I mean? It's just a pure love of the game. That's what I would say. And so obviously, if you use LLMs to do it, it's a bit, you know, it's a good example. Obviously, that I've heard is it's like taking steroids if you want to go to the gym, right? Now I realize it's probably not entirely the same because steroids have health consequences, but I guess LLMs have environmental consequences. Um, but you can also go to the gym for the love of the game, right? Um, so probably in most things you can do in life, there's always a way to do it easier, right? Or faster, or whatever it is. But sometimes there's just the love for the game. Now, what I would say in response to that is I did use LLMs when building Pico, and that's the sheer amount of unit and integration tests. Not all of them did I write myself. And the reasoning is just because it's, when you want to make sure everything's testable, it is so nice just to be able to, get an LLM just to cover it and make sure that it's not even that I think that it does a good job at writing tests, because I don't think it does a good job, but it's just that I don't like doing it. And I do it when, usually when I write tests, it's when I'm very specifically trying to test a scenario that I'm trying to build. Like, here's a test, right? And but like after the fact, and you just want to, throw thousands of tests at your application, it's great to do that. And my mindset is that if 20% of the tests it makes are pure bogus, it's still beneficial to have those tests, because in the long run, you'll probably weed out the bogus tests. And it's still good to just have tests, because what tests really do is they don't always prove that code is correct, but they prove that when you refactor code, that there hasn't been a behavioral change. And so even if it makes bogus tests, it still makes tests which pass and are a representation of the current state of behavior of your code. And so because of that, if you refactor in the future, even if you then improve things, it still makes sense if you have a bogus test that then flips to an error, because then well, you can then think, well, why did this change? Oh, it's because I actually fixed it. Well, that was a bogus test. So I think that's one of the things I've enjoyed using LLMs for personally is writing tests, because for me there was never a love of the game in writing huge amounts of tests. Um, I've known people who like to write tests more than code, but I was never one of them, unfortunately. Um, but why would you not just use LLMs just to say spit out the code? Well, one of the reasons is because sometimes you really want to think through the solution to be as efficient and ideal as you can. And one of the things that LLMs tend to do is to give you a solution. But just because something is a solution doesn't mean it's the right solution or the solution you were looking for. So I think with LLMs, what you tend to find is they're very good at getting you 70 to 80% of the way there. And that's also one of the reasons why they're quite dangerous, because getting 70 to 80% there was never difficult in software engineering. It was always closing the final gap. And closing the final gap tends to require a lot of very specific intuition on the problem, if that makes sense. And it's not that LLMs are incapable of closing the final 20 to 30%, but that they don't know what the final 20 to 30% is. So what that means is you have to actually still do the hard work of still reviewing the code that they spat out. But inevitably, what happens too much with AI generated code, because it produces so much code, it makes it difficult to perform that final 20 to 30% bound, leap, because you've not built up the understanding of the problem matter by building it yourself. Does that make sense? I hope I've explained it now. It's not necessarily because LLMs are good or bad, or they're evil or morally good, but it's um, sometimes by getting deep into the problem, you understand then what the final 20 or 30% then should be. But sometimes it can obviously be a bit concerning, because it can feel like we're almost living in like a post-intellectual world. But we'll obviously have to see what the future is when LLMs actually cost what they actually cost Anthropic and OpenAI and all of this, because who knows what the actual cost of this stuff is until they actually make their companies profitable. Yeah, and especially when you're in a boom economy like we had in the 2010s, people don't tend to care about money as much, right? There's so much money sloshing around that um is easier for people to get bought into fads and hypes, because it's um it always feels like money will come back around, if that makes sense. But we've had a lot of contraction in the past few years, and obviously in America nearly all of the economic growth has been because of AI. And when I say that, I'm not saying because of what AI does, but because of the investment in AI. That's all of the economic growth in America. And there's obviously going to get to a point where you have to actually start having a bottom line to justify the evaluations. Um, they have the new SpaceX IPO today, I think it was. I don't know all the details. I don't know much about finance, but I know with the market cap that apparently they're projecting, it would require is something along the lines of um, everyone in the first world countries to both be using their satellite service at a cost of 1,000 a month, and both be um, paying about 30,000 a month or something like that in enterprise services per person in first world countries. So the evaluations are, for a lot of people, that's more money than they pay to their local government in tax. And that's how, that's underpinning the evaluation of SpaceX, right? And making Elon Musk the first trillionaire. But I don't know the details. I'm not a finance person. But there's obviously a lot of absurdity right now. And who knows? Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? And yeah, all it is right now is a lot of major red equity. You're right. And who knows what the actual cost of all this will be when they actually ask us to pay what it's worth. One of the things that I have been hearing from a lot of tech companies is how they've been changing their hiring process, and it's in a way which makes me unhappy, um, because it's I never liked the um, leak code interviews where on the spot you're meant to solve a problem, and partly that's because whenever I'm in an interview like that, my mind just goes blank. I can't think of anything. I can't even remember how to do something basic in a language, like how to do a for loop. um I don't know what it is about the interview process, but whenever I've been asked to actually code in front of someone in an interview, my mind wipes itself, right? It's like stage fright, right? And I always liked the interviews in the past where they would say, go away, spend, I don't know, 4 hours or something like that, building something, um, to the spec or something like that. And then let's have an interview where we talk about it in person. Because I always liked that because it gave me the ability to, put some effort into the building the thing. I realized that sometimes some companies took the piss with this type of interview method. Um, and building the thing and uh, then justifying in front of the interviewer, and that was nicer than like the leak code ones for me. Um, or alternatively, my favorite types of interviews is where you just sit down and the interviewer will just ask you questions and you keep it casual, like how did you solve this type of problem in your previous job? And then you explain it and you just keep it casual and fun and approachable. Maybe have some jokes. But from what I understand and what I've been hearing, is that the leak code is becoming a lot more common in the interview process. And the reasoning is just because if you ask someone to go home and code something out, they're going to use AI now. And so it becomes less beneficial as of an interview question, right? And because of that, this is all to say that there might actually be an argument to coding, um, things yourself more, because you're more likely then to be more equipped in those interviews when someone inevitably asks you to do it in front of them. Um, just because of the distrust, because of AI. Isn't there a third trigger? Yeah, it was this one. Which is a shame. So I think this is probably horribly broken. I don't know where we're up to. Yeah, I think different people do better with different interview processes. Um, but obviously because of AI, there may be a bit of consolidation in what types of interview processes you can do. Well, the thing is that I've been interviewed a lot, and I've also interviewed a lot in the past. Um, it it really depends on the company and the culture of the company. That's the main thing I'd have to say there. Um, and the reason why that's also important to know is that if you are being interviewed, the people the personalities of the people interviewing you is a direct representation of the culture of the company. And the reason why I say that is because if you are being interviewed in a way which is toxic, chances are the company is toxic and you wouldn't even want to work there anyway. So just a small hint for when you get to the interview process in the future. Because there very much is the whole I've just joined this company and I immediately want to leave. So, what haven't I done yet? Or have I done code which my querier can't handle? Because that's also possible. Oh no, it's because I have this still. Oops. Yeah, I got into the industry self-taught because I dropped out of university, but I um I have to admit it's a lot harder now. By many people entering and leaving the room without. It's See, the thing is that and this is obviously, a bit of a sad thing about the industry, is there's there's a lot of insecure people in tech. Um and that's partly because tech, especially more before the age of AI maybe, um you know, I think it's something fundamental on how the human brain works, which is that things we understand, we think are simple, and things we don't understand, we think are hard. And I think that's a fundamental just how the human brain works. Once you've formed the neural pathways on something, you um you believe it's simple because executing those neural pathways again is easy for you, right? Whereas if you don't know something, executing those neural pathways is obviously hard because they don't exist or they're obviously very rocky terrain. And there's a lot of people in the interview process, people over valuing what they know as something that they feel like you have to know because they know, if that makes sense. Like they see it as a fundamental piece of knowledge. Dare I say common sense? I hate the phrase common sense because I don't believe anything is common sense. So they get overworked up if you don't know something they know, and then if you know stuff that they don't know, right? They don't care about that much, and and a lot of tech interviews can get quite elitist if the interviewer is an insecure person, because they'll be like, oh, you don't know how to invert a binary tree. I know how to do that, right? It's easy to do. If you can't do that, then you're effectively worthless as in this industry. And obviously, the common joke is that you never actually do that in your day-to-day job. I wouldn't be surprised if in tech the interview process, it is the most disproportionate in how hard the interview process tends to be to how hard the job actually is. Because a lot of these interviews, they're extremely hard, but the job itself, you know, can you do all this complicated data structure stuff? Okay, on the job we just make crud endpoints. It's ridiculous. Um, the interview should be a representation of what the job actually is. That's the fundamental truth. It shouldn't be an elitist um high score or like competition or whatever nonsense. That's not what it should be. Um and the reason why this is also the case as an interviewer is because when I first started interviewing, I slightly had this mindset, and I soon realized that you end up hiring the people you don't want to work with. And that can also destroy your experience at a company too. So if you're one of these like elitist interviewers, and let's say you do hire people who are, the best employees, by this metric, you may accidentally end up also hiring people you just fundamentally don't want to work with. And so, really, the best interview processes are ones which focus on personality rather than technical skills. Because if you enjoy working with someone, then it's easy to spend the time to learn and improve. So, if a company is giving you a toxic and horrible interview, then chances are there's going to be toxic and horrible employees to work with after the fact. So you shouldn't get worked up when an interview goes sideways like that. And if people are being disrespectful by entering or leaving the interview room or not giving you the space to, think your thoughts through and make the whole situation feel welcoming and approachable, then chances are once you've joined the company, it's just going to be that, times 100 toxic behavior. So that's all to say, if you do get rejected by a company like that, don't take it too hard. It's kind of like one of those things where they're showing you who they truly are. Okay, what have I done wrong in my... There's always a chance that my querier struggles with these triggers because I don't know how... I know I've tested this type of trigger substantially. I don't know how many triggers I've tested. Oh, am I up again? Can you hear me? I've disconnected. Loud and clear. Okay. Okay. So this might be a problem with my query. Let's just have a look for a second. But are you in university or something like that? It's quite impressive to be diving into things like OpenGL and Vulkan near the beginning of your career. Wait a minute. That's good. The key thing about tech at the end of the day is finding it fun and enjoying it. Um, it's always been one of those industries where passion really does drive your career. Of different. I think I've just. It's going to be a lot of the same music, similar types of music. I'm sure I like this one too. I love to work to music like minimal techno. Shipping a button in 2026. It sounds very dystopian. Oh, yes. I missed that. Is that what I missed? Yeah, a dystopian commentary. Yeah. I assume it's going to be quite heavily about AI. Oh, really? A dystopian commentary in probably the around the 2017 period would have all been about agile and Scrum and all of this. So this is going to be because I'm not populating jobs kind because I only just introduced that in this session. That's right. And these tests predate this session. And I need to. Did I ever add these things to this? Okay. I think I'm going to avoid doing React type content on the stream and just try and keep it. I don't mind having like commentary on things. I think I'm going to try and avoid devolving into that. And the reason why I say that ultimately is because I know what happens. What tends to happen once stream, you know, people start to do content like that, they just don't stop. So it's the easy content, if you know what I mean. So let's just say email test email. So I think the problem is it's not that I'm doing it wrong here. I'm just not populating it downstream. However, that doesn't stop me from setting it up here anyway. So I'm thinking what the issue is that in the enqueue thing, I'm probably not passing this down. And that's I'm wondering if this is even here in the query at all. No, of course not. Let's worry about that in a second. So, in saying that, I probably will be stopping soon anyway because it's 3:30 in the morning for me. But I appreciate you for stopping by, participating in the stream. No, there wouldn't be a result there, would there? No, that doesn't make sense. Does it even make sense actually to insert a result? Can't insert a result, can you? Lost myself. Oh yeah, of course. Well, you don't really insert that, do you? Because it's going to default to the current time. Where do I say last error? I think I changed that from last error to error. Oh yeah, I have to regenerate. I don't know if my stream has been having issues constantly today. All right, we got the test passing. So we've migrated the tables to a mutant of event sourcing, where we're storing the versions in like an order history. And instead of a snapshot table as such, we're keeping the snapshot as the root table. So it's kind of a weird one because you're interfacing with the snapshot directly, but we'll record all the versions here. So it's like a mutant. It's mutant event sourcing. It's inverted event sourcing. So that might mean I have the benefit of the fast indexes while also having a full record of the history of the state of everything. And it keeps the state with triggers, so it's atomic. That's the idea. So we'll just have to see how much noise that actually creates. So I think I'm going to call it here. I've really appreciate everyone who's tuned in, and looks like I've had a bit of working, but yeah. Take this as an opportunity to say bye bye. Bye bye.